Before I ask Father Nicholas to deliver the eulogy of his beloved brother, I'd like to read to the family a message from His Eminence Metropolitan of Korea and Exarch of Japan, Ambrosios. Dear Mr. Stratos, Kossis, and family, we have just been informed about the passing away of your dear father and most beloved to all of us, Father Nikodemos, and we hasten to express our support to you, your wife, and children in your pain and sorrow. Unfortunately, the circumstances do not allow us to be present during the funeral service of our late brother and concelebrant, the Hieromonk Nikodemos. We have already held a holy memorial service for the repose of his blessed soul here in Korea. Out of necessity, therefore, we send our wishes in writing, wishing that the Lord of life and death gives him eternal rest in the land of the living, together with the righteous and all the saints. We pray extensively, repeating the prayer of our church. Lord, just as you have made your servant Nikodemos a priest of your church on earth, likewise make him a celebrant in your heavenly holy altar. We will never forget the sacrificial love and the valuable help of many years of the late Father Nikodemos for the dissemination of the Orthodox witness in Korea. For this reason, as a small sample of our deepest gratitude, we will commemorate him daily, morning and evening, during the holy services which are held in the Orthodox metropolis of Korea. I convey to you the warm condolences of His Eminence Metropolitan of Pisidia Sotirios, along with our Korean brothers and sisters who experienced, without ever knowing the late Father Nikodemos personally, his great love and affection. The falling asleep of our respected Father Nikodemos has moved all of us, but at the same time we are possessed by feelings of blissful sadness because we know that he will be in the arms of our risen Lord, whom he loved and served with all his heart and mind in his long priestly ministry. We wish to all his spiritual children the heavenly consolation for the sorrow of the loss they are experiencing, with the warmest wish that they do not forget the spiritual legacy of humility, simplicity, and love that he left to us all. With much love and warm condolences to you and your family, and prayers for Blessed Anastasis, Metropolitan of Korea and Exarch of Japan, Ambrosios.
They are also visiting from St. Nikodemos Monastery.
And we welcome also monks Michael, Hieromonk, and Philaretos, who are with us from St. Nikodemos Monastery.
Where should I reach from the pulpit or from? Should we say, can we do that? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Your Eminence, beloved brother clergy, beloved parishioners and friends, dear Strato and family. First of all, can you all hear me okay? Okay. It's with a great sense of joy and sadness that I read these words to you about the life of Father Nikodemos Kossis. Joy because they refer to a person who was consumed with zeal for the love of God and the love of his fellow human beings. Zeal to spread the word of God in the hearts of all who encountered him. And sadness because a man reposed unto the Lord who was a tremendous comfort and support and source of healing of both soul and body to countless numbers of people. Father Nicholas Kossis was born in the village of Vrisa, Lesbos, Mytilene in 1928. His father, Evstratios, worked as a baker in Smyrna, and after the exchange of populations, he settled in Vrisa, where he married Maria, the jewel of the village. When Nicholas was 2.5 years old, his mother and the infant died during childbirth in the presence of the midwife and her best friend, Mircina. The last words to her best friend were, "Please take care of my son." Things were very difficult for young Nicholas, who spent most of his time in his father's bakery and with his grandmother, Lemonia. When he was 5 years old, he got badly hurt while playing, and he was crying, calling out for his mommy. A young widow named Fotini became so heartbroken by this that she took him in her arms, carried him to the bakery, and told his father, "I want to become this boy's mother." His father agreed with the idea, and they soon were married. Fotini became a great buffer between Nicholas and his father, who was quick to use the strap, as many fathers did in those days. Fotini raised Nicholas as her own son, and she insisted on having him educated, even though his father's plan was to keep him working in the bakery following elementary school. His father gave in, and Nicholas traveled to Mytilene to attend Gymnasia, the junior high. When he was a young boy, once he took some feta cheese and was in the countryside, where he took a nap underneath the shade of a bush. When he woke up, he felt something heavy on his chest, and when he looked up, he saw a large snake curled on his chest. Apparently, the snake had smelled the cheese that he had eaten. Nicholas prayed to St. John the Hut Dweller, as this took place near the saint's chapel, and he jumped up and the snake flew off. Ever since then, Father Kossis loved St. John the Hut Dweller and liked to celebrate his feast day. Nicholas excelled in wrestling and participated in national competitions. When he was 16, his high school was shut down for 2 years due to the German occupation, so he finished high school when he was 20 years old. Then he served in the Greek military and became an officer of the Special Forces due to the needs created by the Civil War, and was sent to the border of Albania. After his release from the armed forces, Nicholas worked in Athens and continued his education. In April of 1957, he married Maria, and shortly thereafter he was hired by the Department of Immigration and Homeland Security. Less than a year later, in March of 1958, a life-changing event occurred. Nicholas fainted while on the train going to his office. He was immediately transferred to the nearest hospital. Strangely enough, he suffered a severe gastrointestinal bleed, even though he was in great physical shape with no previous ailments. The surgeons performed an emergent partial resection of the stomach to control the bleeding. The surgical intervention scheduled the following morning, however, proved unsuccessful. The bleeding stopped for approximately 8 hours. That same evening, another massive gastrointestinal bleeding was in progress, leading to acute blood loss, anemia, and a severe drop in his blood pressure. His condition became desperate as the doctors had exhausted all possible options, and at some point Nicholas overheard them offering their condolences to the newlywed Maria, suggesting to her that she begin his funeral arrangements. The medical assistants moved the already comatose Nicholas to a side room and covered him with a sheet. His wife Maria, who had given birth to their first child, Vasiliki, only 2 months before this ordeal, was understandably inconsolable. Shortly before midnight, Nicholas heard a voice in his subconscious saying, "Nicholas, get up and follow me." This took place twice. The third time, the voice said, "Nicholas, get up and be my servant." Immediately, a powerful hand grabbed him by the shoulder, and Nicholas found himself sitting on the bed. He felt perfectly healthy, and soon the news of his resurrection spread to the entire hospital staff, which attributed his cure to a great miracle. Father Kossis would tell me that even years later, he could feel this hand grabbing his shoulder. Along with the cured stomach, the Lord also created a new heart, full of divine zeal for the until now unchurched Nicholas, who did not understand any of this up to this point. Father Kossis told me that for 3 days he was seeing a bright light and was asking people to dim the light, but they told him there was no bright light in the room. A day later, while Nicholas was still in the same hospital room, an elderly man approached him and asked him to buy any of the man's spiritual books. Nicholas said, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any money." The elderly visitor placed a book in his hands. Nicholas touched the New Testament for the first time in his life. When he opened the Holy Scriptures, his eyes immediately fell upon this very pertinent verse, "Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation," from 2 Corinthians. A few moments later, when Nicholas raised his eyes to thank his visitor, the elderly man was nowhere to be found. His wife introduced Nicholas with a kind priest who, seeing his newfound zeal for the faith, connected him with Father George Kritikos from Holy Unmercenaries Church in Piraeus, who was a spiritual child of St. Porphyrios for more than 40 years and served as Nicholas's spiritual father for many years. Father Kossis and Presbytera Maria had 2 children, Strato and Vasiliki, but when Vasiliki was 2 years old, she suffered an allergic reaction to a smallpox vaccine which was given to her due to the smallpox epidemic of that time, and Vasiliki became deaf and mute. With full access to the immigration process, Nicholas easily acquired a permanent visa for Canada and traveled to Toronto. He sought gainful employment, and in a few months he was gainfully employed as a licensed welder. He soon rented an apartment and brought his family to Toronto in hopes of improving Vasiliki's condition. Later on in her life, Vasiliki had an untimely death at a young age, and this was a source of tremendous pain for the whole family, and Father Kossis would always commemorate Vasiliki in any of the memorial services we would do. In Toronto, Nicholas attended Panagitsa, a well-known Greek Orthodox church in that city. The proistamenos well known to us was the late Father George Dimopoulos, who served in Wilkes-Barre and Upper Darby and who taught theology at St. Tikhon's Seminary. Nicholas was attending every service he could, assisting Father George, who was now his new confessor. His zeal to serve the church did not go unnoticed by his local Bishop Timothy, who asked Nicholas to serve in the priesthood. Presbytera Maria, who was not in favor of being married to a priest and had rejected the idea up until that point, finally gave her consent, and Nicholas became a seminarian at Holy Cross Seminary in Boston in 1964. He sent his wife and children back to Athens to his in-laws, and he moved to Boston. At Holy Cross, Nicholas doubled up on courses, doing 2 years' worth of coursework in each year of study. Nicholas attended school during the day, and in the evenings, he worked at the Pier 4 restaurant. He related to one of his spiritual children that his schedule was the following. He would go to Orthros at 8 in the morning at the seminary, and then attend classes from 9 to 12. Then he would go to work at the restaurant from 12 to 11 p.m., and then he would come back to the seminary and study till 3 in the morning and get up for Orthros again, matins at 8 in the morning. This zeal and diligence that he had in school was exemplified through his entire life of service as a priest of the Most High God. He graduated in June of 1967. The evil one tried to sidetrack Nicholas by using his boss at the Greek restaurant. His boss, who was also from Mytilene, and the owner of the restaurant admired Nicholas's overall character and honesty and offered him a tremendous amount of money to be his full-time manager. However, when Nicholas refused his offer and explained that his desire was to serve the Lord, the owner became belligerent and called him all sorts of names. A priest, you're turning down this great opportunity to be a priest. You're crazy. Fia apado, in other words, get out of here. Father Kossis told me that I think he visited this fellow later, many years later, and they patched things up. A week after his graduation from Holy Cross, Nicholas was ordained to the diaconate, and a week later to the order of the Holy Priesthood. The week following his ordination to the priesthood, Father Nicholas was assigned to the parish of Kimisis tis Theotokou in Aliquippa with barely any liturgical experience. He practiced the liturgy once or twice during the week with Bishop Gerasimos, now he was on his own in a mostly English-speaking parish. Father Kossis had told me that when he did his first liturgy in Aliquippa, being inexperienced, he forgot to take off the ayer from his shoulders, and the chanters had to intervene to tell him to take it off. Father Kossis and Presbytera Maria and family served the parish in Aliquippa for 14 years. As such, Father Kossis holds the record because when he arrived in Aliquippa, the people told us that the average stay for a priest after that was 2.5 years. The people in Aliquippa worshiped the ground that Father Kossis walked on, perhaps because in a matter of 3 months he would visit all the parishioners one by one, even visiting parishioners at 11 o'clock at night from what they told me. They also shared with me many miraculous events that occurred during Father Nicholas's 14-year stay there. Some of these miracles include, and I'm being brief now because I don't want to make this too long, Saint Nectarios of Pendapolis, who worked many cures of cancer patients, even healing people that were in stage 4 cancer, who would appear in the altar window during the chanting of the weekly Paraklesis service to the saint, and seeing Christ come into the church and the icons stream myrrh during Holy Week, resurrecting a woman from the dead so she could confess and receive Holy Communion before she died again a few months later. Another time, without any parishioner notifying him, Father Nicholas departed for the hospital at 3 a.m. to minister to a parishioner who had been severely injured at work and had told people not to tell anyone. And he scolded his wife when Father Kossis got there and said, "I told you not to tell anyone." But when they asked Father Kossis, he said, "Oh, a little bird told me." And then there was the case of a parishioner who, in great anger, said to Father Kossis that he would come the next day to kill him. Excited about the prospect of dying for Christ, Father Nicholas told the man that he'd be waiting for him at the church. Even though he looked forward to the next day, his beloved wife, Presbytera Maria, was scared. The next day, the parishioner appeared at the church with a gun. Father Kossis came out and said to him, "Chtipa dos tithos, shoot right here in the chest." The parishioner was amazed that Father Kossis was not scared of death, and then he put the gun down and he left. Father Nicholas was not afraid to be bold about upholding high standards for the parishioners and the church premises. Once, someone, when he stepped in the room, said, "Here comes the priest, let's pass a tray." And Father Kossis said, "I'm not forgiving you for that. The priesthood has to be held very high." And the fellow was begging Father Kossis to forgive him for a year, and he wouldn't. A year later, he did. Once, after Father Kossis forbade the parish to bring in a belly dancer for an event in the church hall, and when they brought one in anyway, he followed up on his word and turned off the electricity to the church hall for the rest of the night. At another time, when certain parish council members were pushing to add a bar to the new church hall, Father Nicholas responded, "I will go ask the boss," meaning Christ, "and come back and tell you what he said." After praying in front of the crucified Christ, because the hall was right next to the church, Father Kossis returned and said, "I asked the boss and he said no. But if you don't believe me, you go ask him." One by one, he sent all the parish council members to go stand in front of the crucifix to ask Christ if he wants a bar in the hall. After they all came back, they agreed with Father Kossis that the boss did not want this. Once they planned a vacation trip to Ocean City, Maryland. Presbytera Maria had asked Father Kossis to make the hotel arrangements. After many hours of driving, they arrived at Ocean City, Maryland. At this point, the kids are whiny, it's late, and everyone is hungry. Presbytera says to Father, "What hotel arrangement did you make?" To which Father Kossis says, "Oh, I forgot." And then he says, "I see a store with some lights. I'll go ask them where we could find a hotel." When he knocks on the door, a fellow opens it who had a Greek accent, and Father Kossis asks the question. And the man says to him, "Who are you?" And Father Nicholas says, "I am Father Nicholas from Kossis Tis Theotokou Church in Aliquippa, PA." And the man says, "Come in and bring your family in. My wife has been waiting for you for 3 nights. And there was already a table filled with food waiting for them. And the man explained that his wife had been seeing a dream for 3 nights straight, saying that the Virgin Mary is going to send St. Nicholas to help her. And Father Nicholas from Kossis Tis Theotokou, which is the Virgin Mary Church, came. This lady had been trying to fundraise to build the church there in Ocean City, Maryland. So Father Kossis, I'm assuming, spent his entire vacation fundraising and helping her, and now the church is built there. When Father Theodore Sideris, a close friend of Father Nicholas, kept asking him to come to Easton so that they be geographically closer, Bishop Maximus told Father Kossis, "Why would you want to go there? They have many problems there. Here in Aliquippa, things are good." So Father Nicholas obeyed. Soon after, though, he saw a dream of the Annunciation Church in Easton being on fire, and the Virgin Mary saying to him, "Why aren't you coming here to put out the fire?" When Father Nicholas told Bishop Maximus this, His Eminence replied, "You need to go to Easton." The small parish of Annunciation Church in Easton was facing multifarious challenges, and they needed a priest of Father Nicholas's caliber. Presbytera worked side by side with him, and in a few years, they won the hearts of the people. There was Tuesday night Paraclesi services to St. Nectarios, fiery sermons on Sundays and feast days, and bicycle excursions for the youth, having their mothers by his side. All of these activities soon began to bear much fruit. Every Holy Week, Father Nicholas would hire excellent chanters from Greece to elevate and move his parishioners with the most melodious and compunctionate hymns of the church year. By the mid-'80s, he had developed quite a spiritual nucleus. Father Nicholas bought his first house ever in Bethlehem Township. The finished office space in the spacious garage soon was transformed, and it housed the chapel to the newly appeared saints of Mytilene, Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene. The chapel soon became his confessional, as crowds of people would come from Philadelphia, Toms River, New Jersey, Aliquippa, and elsewhere to pray to the saints, receive spiritual guidance, and have their confessions heard. In the early 90s, as many as 20 to 25 people would gather on some Saturdays in the basement of the house, where Presbytera Maria was a most gracious hostess. After their initial fellowship and lunch, Father Nicholas would begin the confessions, and Constantine Zalalas would speak and answer questions on the faith for hours. The feast day of the chapel is celebrated every bright Tuesday with great attendance and much joy. In 2001, Father Nicholas was assigned by Bishop Maximus to the neighboring community, our community of St. Nicholas, to assist Father Michael Varvarelis, the then proistamenos of the community. At that time, Father Constantine Papadopoulos became the proistamenos of Annunciation Parish in Easton. In Bethlehem, Father Nicholas was relieved from the administrative duties of the parish and was able to place more emphasis on the spiritual arena of our faith. On October 28, 2016, Father Nicholas's most beloved Presbytera Maria reposed in the Lord after a short illness. Father Nicholas's loss was greatly softened by the continuous presence of his devoted spiritual children, who kept him continuous company and, along with his son and family, provided for his immediate needs. In the fall of 2019, Father Nicholas went to St. Anthony's Monastery in Arizona, and after going to confession to Metropolitan Athanasius of Lemesos, was tonsured by Father Paisius with a monastic schema shortly before the elder Ephraim of Arizona passed away. He received the name of Nikodemos, which he related to us has the same meaning as the name of Nicholas. In the years to come, Father Kossis would be in and out of half a dozen hospitals and rehabilitation facilities. During the years of the recent epidemic, Father Nikodemos continued to receive people for confession in his home and guided others via telephone. In the morning of April 6, 2022, Father Nicholas suffered a stroke which further deteriorated his already compromised health. While in the hospital, the faithful priest of the Good Shepherd continued to bless and give instruction to his visiting spiritual children using pen and paper, when he was unable to speak. In the morning hours of 4/12/22, Father Nikodemos left this transient world to meet his most beloved Lord Jesus Christ, whom he faithfully served in the last 63 years of his adult life. For the people that know him, it was obvious that God had given Father Nikodemos many spiritual gifts. He related very well with people. If someone would get upset with him, he would purposely spend extra time with them, and then they would make up and become friends again. He had tremendous zeal to share the gospel with people. He was an excellent confessor, spending much time with people to help them and catechize them. Many people were healed spiritually, but also physically, with his prayers and the intercessions of Saints Nicholas, Raphael, and Irene. A spiritual child of his told me that his son's white blood cells had gone lower than 12,000. This was so low that the son could accidentally hit his hand on something in his sleep and die from the hit. So the father called Father Kossis right away crying, and Father Kossis told him to bring his son to him. The father took him right away that Wednesday, and even though the son wasn't close to the church at all, Father Kossis went next door to the chapel of St. Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene and confessed him. That Friday, the young man went to UPenn for a surgery to remove his spleen, but miraculously everything had become normal. Through Father's intercessions, the young man had become well. Father Kossis was extremely charitable and helped many people who were in need, and he would do it in a quiet way. Father Nikodemos loved mission work, and once when he was in seminary, Archbishop Iakovos asked all the seminarians who would be willing to go to Africa to do missionary work. Nicholas was the only one to raise his hand, but Archbishop Iakovos told him, "Kossis, you're married, and we need celibate priests to go there." But nevertheless, Father Kossis helped Mama Stavritsa financially and spiritually for years, and later on he would gather money and send it to Metropolitan Ambrose of Korea, whose letter Metropolitan Savas read, for the missionary work there. Father Kossis was not a people pleaser. His goal was to love and serve God above everything else, and God protected and guided him throughout his life. Once when he was leaving the church, he lost his balance and fell head first toward the pavement when suddenly an invisible force caught him and gently lowered him to the ground, from where he was able to get up without any broken bones. Father Kossis was encouraging and uplifting and always urging people to trust God. Even though he could be very loving in confession, he could also box your ears when necessary. He had the discernment to know how much to push someone and when to back off, and with his God-given gift, he was a great spiritual father. Father Kossis did vigil every night while he was able physically, and he was gifted by God to be clairvoyant, as evidenced by many cases of him revealing things to people that there is no way he could have known. There are many stories I could relate to you, but I will just share a few that show his clairvoyance. There was a Greek doctor in Easton, and at 11 o'clock at night, one night, he says, Father Kossis tells Maria, Presbytera Maria, I think I need to call him. She says, are you crazy? It's 11 o'clock at night. He'll curse you out. When Presbytera went to the bathroom, he called the doctor, and he says, oh, Father, thank God. Please come here right away. He was betrayed by a young woman and was about to commit suicide. And Father went to his house and spoke to him and saved his life. A spiritual child of his told me that he fell into the sin of condemnation and gossip with a friend of his. And right at that moment, Father Kossis called him on his cell phone and said to him, my child, with the condemnations you're doing at this moment, you won't be saved. Another time, a spiritual child was with Father Kossis, who asked him, are you still smoking? That has to stop now, immediately. And the spiritual child was thinking, yeah, right, as if I'm going to do that. Then as soon as the man went out to the car, he put a cigarette in his mouth and with his right hand grabbed the lighter. But all of a sudden his hand froze and it wouldn't move. The man thought to himself, what happened to my hand? Am I going crazy? He then took his left hand, grabbed his right hand to try and force the lighter to his mouth, but it wouldn't move for anything. The spiritual child realized that this is from God, and then he threw down the cigarette, his hand unfroze, and he promised to stop smoking. Many times it happened that during confession, before Father Nikodemos' spiritual children could ask the questions they had prepared, he would answer them. At other times, as people were thinking of questions in their heads, he would be answering them out loud. His spiritual children have told me that on multiple occasions, he related to them things they had experienced or done when there is no possible way he could have known aside from divine enlightenment. God also blessed him with many gifts, including prayer to change the weather. There was one time when Father Kossis went with someone to Aliquippa for the centennial there. His helper told me we were ready to go into the gate. There was a delay. The pilot comes out and says, we have a big storm, so we've been delayed by 30 minutes. Father Kossis asked him, what did the pilot say? He said, there's a storm and a delay. They continued talking. A half an hour went by. The pilot again comes out and says, we have another delay due to bad weather. The third time the pilot comes out and says, we have another delay, Father Kossis says, this won't do. He takes out his prayer robe and prays for 2-3 minutes, and then all of a sudden the pilot says, the sky cleared up, so we're leaving now. Once they take off, Father Kossis tells his helper to look out of the windows on both sides of the small plane they were in. And the helper realized that they were in something like an aerial tunnel. In front of the airplane it was clear, while all around the storm was raging. There are at least 5-6 spiritual children of his who became monastics in various monasteries, as well as married priests and presbyteres. For many years, when Hieromonk Olimpiada would ask, Father Kossis would go up to Holy Protection Monastery, serve liturgy with Father Mark, preach for a long time, and then hear confessions for hours on end. He once related to me that he would see in his dreams what he should preach, and then he would wake up and write it down. I wish I had that. But anyway, one of his spiritual children related to me that on the day before his repose, he saw a vision of Father Kossis ascending through some large gates high in the sky, and the man saw beautiful scenery with many wonderful people, and the Father was ascending higher, and he ended up stopping next to St. Paisios the Athonite on his one side and St. Anthony the Great on his other. Father Kossis loved his family very much, And he always emphasized that everyone can become a saint, and that's why we're here on earth. We are all called to become holy. I'm sure there are many things that I've left out because it is not possible to do justice to a person of such a great spiritual magnitude. But may he have a good paradise, and may we follow his good example of zeal and love for God. Amen. After paying your last respects, you're asked to go to your cars. There is a bus that the family has provided to go for Holy Protection Monastery for the burial in the Macaria. May his memory be eternal in the kingdom of heaven, and may we have his intercessions. Δεν θα τα επαναλάβω αυτά στα ελληνικά, γιατί είναι μακροσκελές, αλλά ήθελα να πω ότι μετά από τον τελευταίο ασπασμό είστε όλοι προσκαλεσμένοι να πάτε στα αυτοκίνητά σας ή αν θέλετε μπορείτε να μπείτε στο λεωφορείο που παρέχει η οικογένεια για να πάμε στην Αγία Σκέπη για την ταφή και τη Μακαρία. Αιωνία του η μνήμη.
I thank Father Nicholas for his rich and loving testimonial to our beloved Father Nikodemos, and I simply want to express my gratitude to him for his ministry of reconciliation, how seriously he took his role as a confessor and spiritual director. This is a rare gift. Every priest, after a certain point, at the discretion of his bishop, can hear confessions and pronounce forgiveness of sins according to the mystery of the church. But confession and spiritual direction are not the same thing. Confession is a sacramental act. Spiritual direction is a spiritual activity that is the providence of certain souls with discretion, and that Father exercised this in ministry so zealously and for such a long time is a great testimonial to his zeal for God, that his desire was to bring souls that had been separated from him by their failings closer to the loving and forgiving God, and create a stronger communion between them and God so that their lives could be healthier and witnesses to the transformative power of God. The fact that Father came to his ministry so relatively late in life is also stirring, to think that he hadn't held a New Testament in his hands until he was 21. The fact that he did so many different kinds of work before becoming a priest at the age of 39. These are encouraging signs, as it were, that there is no such thing as too late. You know, that the calling comes when the calling comes, and that Father had the willingness to respond wholeheartedly and to throw himself into the arms of God is a wonderful and soul-stirring testimonial to us. Now, as Father Nicholas said, we will now give our final kiss to Father, and from there we will proceed to the Monastery of the Holy Protection, where he asked to be interred.